at 68 years of age, my daughter came to me and said, Mom, I want to learn to scuba dive. And I said, great, go do it. And she said, well, I want you to be my dive buddy. And I was a little dubious. I said, well, I can take the classes and so forth with you, but I'm not really sure that this is something I'm going to be able to do. So next slide. So I did, the next slide.
Yeah.
Oh. So I did go ahead and take the classes, and I found out I could do the classes. Then I did the underwater stuff, and then I went ahead and did the open water dive training. And it really wasn't as difficult as I expected. As a matter of fact, in some ways, it was kind of easy. Next slide. So there are some health benefits to diving as you get older. You do want to be in pretty reasonable shape. You don't want to, go into diving when you haven't exercised for 20 years. But it is a low impact exercise. You are floating in the water. I have asthma, so breathing is something I was really worried about. But the fact is, after a dive, I commonly feel my breathing is easier because it's yoga type breathing. You breathe in deeply, you breathe out deeply. Panicked breathing just doesn't work. Panting doesn't work. It actually makes you feel better. Next slide. However, there are some benefits to scuba diving that are unconfirmed. And I actually have seen people in the grocery store with their masks and their snorkels on during COVID-19, but that's obviously a myth. I imagine it's better than nothing, but it's pretty close to nothing. So what is involved in training? You have to read a book. You have to take a test, pretty simple test, no one flunks. You have to get in a pool and practice some skills. And then you go out to a lake in Virginia and do your practice dives. And I'll get back to that lake later. Next slide. So some of the trips that I've taken. We went on a 5-day sailboat trip to the Bahamas. And I have to say that the ship accommodations were a little bit tight, but the scenery was beautiful. The food was unbelievable. The company was really good, and the diving was incredible. Get away from the shore and you can really see some fantastic things in the water. Next slide. So we did do a shark feeding. I can't say that I think that's a good idea to teach sharks to eat around people, but we did do that. We did go visit a couple of islands where there are some wild birds, iguanas, etc. We did some night diving. We did a lot of reef diving. And we didn't have to do anything to get there. We had an entire crew to take care of us. Next slide. And here's some pictures of the boat, relaxing on the boat. You can see the guy down below is literally sleeping on the boat. Some pictures of the fish. The bunks were not very big. That was a little bit, but we were so tired at the end of the day. It was fabulous. We just slept like babies. Next slide. And this is a video of the shark feeding. And it's a little stilted coming over the internet, but you can see they have this big frozen ball of fish and they put it out there and everybody comes. You've got a large grouper there. You've got some reef sharks and they come along and they take hunks of it away. There we are taking video behind that doesn't make any sense because the fish don't recognize it. Did you pause it, Linda?
No.
Okay. The video is having a little bit of trouble. Next slide.
Done.
I think if you hit the, there you go. Okay, and this is dive training underwater. And so we had someone there to do a little bit of training. I did my open water in the ocean, my advanced open water in the ocean. And you can tell that a lot of these people are really new divers because you should be diving in a horizontal position and not in an upright position. So this is a lot of new divers, and a lot of them were people over 60 and over 70. But it's very, very relaxing. So we did make lots of friends. These are all people of different ages. That one in the lower left is my daughter. That's me in the upper right. Next slide. Lots of fish friends. So we saw big groupers, crabs. That's a nurse shark in the lower right corner, and that's a ray swimming through the water at night. We did do some night dives. Next slide. And this is time out of the water, relaxing on the boat. Some of the people on the boat, the crew, went diving for conch shells, and they brought them up and they actually served them to us for a dinner. And it was really good. I have to say that I kind of felt sorry for the snails, but it was a very, very good meal. Some people did some fishing, and then my daughter is over in the lower right-hand corner, and on that island were these birds that literally came over and ate out of your hand. They were so isolated from humans, they had no idea that humans might be a problem. It was really a magical place. Next slide. And this is sunset. We're getting ready to be picked up after a dive. And this is goodbye to the Bahamas. Next slide. And then last year I went to Bonaire, and it's considered a diver's paradise because there are so many places to dive. They provide you with a car. They provide you with all your tanks of air, and that's for getting your room, which is not expensive. It also includes food. Next slide. And where we stayed, again, very, very friendly animals. That iguana was pretty much a mainstay of lunch and dinner. He would be there, and you could hand feed him. Couldn't handle him, but you could hand feed him. The birds would also come and hang around. And after every dive, divers get in the pool and enjoy a beer. I'm not a beer drinker, but very popular. You can dive right off the dock. So you can step off the dock and do a dive. You can drive down the beach with the car that they give you and do a dive, or you can get on a boat and go way out and do a dive. Next slide. And these are some of the things that we saw. That is a goatfish in the middle. I keep forgetting, I want to call it a needlefish, but that's not the name of it, and a pufferfish, and I'm not sure what the guy on the left side is. I spent too much time looking at them to name them. We did see a lot of sea turtles. This is a video of a sea turtle scraping away at the coral on the bottom of the ocean. And when he did that, other fish would come around and grab tidbits that he would break loose. And we did see a lot of sea turtles. It's a really magical place there. Okay, next slide. Yeah, it really wants to read. Okay. And so diving is not a lot of work. It's very relaxing. The water holds you up. This is also a video of the side of a coral reef and all the fish going by. And you get an idea of how relaxing it is by how relaxed the divers are. They're not moving a lot. Most of them are moving a little bit, going over or to the side of the coral to see what they can see. So you've probably seen movies where divers are swimming frantically from one place to another, but really you're not doing that when you're diving. You're very relaxed. You're moving your feet a little bit to get from one place to another. If it's a drift dive, you're hardly moving at all. But it's very, very relaxing. Main thing to remember is you need to breathe. We did run into off the pier, there was an octopus that I think had learned from decades of divers being there that humans are not a problem. And next slide. This octopus almost posed for us. You can see him in the middle of the screen. There's a fish near him. That's a sergeant major. The fish will sometimes try to bite off the tips of the tentacle. See, he's changed color to match his surroundings, but you can see that fish is looking for the end of a tentacle to bite off and eat. And so the octopus has his tentacles curled up a lot to protect him from that fish. This octopus was amazing. I bet we weren't 2 feet away from him. He'd curl up and change colors, try to look like more coral. I don't think he's fooling that fish. And I saw this same octopus 3 or 4 times. Almost every time I went out to dive, he would come out and just kind of hang out with the divers. He just really wasn't shy at all. They are considered extremely intelligent animals. There he goes, another dramatic color change. It's just amazing. Next slide. And this is night diving. And I'm not sure if this is a video or not, but yeah, it is. So we did a night dive, and these are tarpons. These fish are a good 5-6 feet long. And I couldn't figure out why they were hanging out with us till I realized that we were disturbing sleeping fish, and the tarpons were taking advantage of the light to catch them. So I did kind of feel bad, but they are huge silvery fish, just beautiful. Next slide. That is a zebrafish, and this is a moray eel on the right side. He's tucked in pretty good, but we did see one, a green moray, that had a head the size of a football. And with their mouth open, they can be a little bit intimidating. Next slide. Little sea urchin. Next slide. Pufferfish. These also are very friendly and really very beautiful. Next slide. This is another picture of a moray eel with a, looks like a grouper annoying him a little bit. This is a smaller moray eel. It's probably only 4, maybe 5 feet long. So it's not a real large one. But it had come out from, they usually are locked away and tucked in rocks, but this one I think had been harassed out of its spot and was trying to find another spot. And this is a really rare thing to see, a squid. This is about 1 foot long. We saw this at sunset, and those colors that you're seeing are real. That is really the color of that squid, just beautiful. There were 3 of them. Next slide. And this is a little video of fish activity. I think there's a squabble over something, but I'm not quite sure what it is. They're very territorial. They will, if you come up to their territory, they will swim up to your face, right up to your mask and try to chase you away, and then they go back to their rock. And you can chase them off their rock, but it's probably not a nice thing to do. Next slide. So we did do some wreck diving in North Carolina. You're going to hear more about this in a video coming up that what somebody at the center is going to do. But next slide. Off the North Carolina is a place called the Graveyard of the Atlantic. And it's where Cape Hatteras juts out into the Atlantic Ocean. And it was a very common place for ships in the 1700s, 1800s, and even early 1900s to get caught up in storms or get caught up on the reefs or the shoals and sink. And then there was a lot of submarine activity. The Germans really were advanced in submarines, both in World War I and World War II. And there are a lot of submarines that have been sunk or were sunk off the coast of the Carolinas, and you can actually go diving there. Next slide. And this is actually a picture of a submarine. You could sort of see it. It's not a really good picture, but a lot of the submarines and ships that have been sunk have been used by the ocean as the start of coral reefs, which are really endangered throughout the world. Next slide. So this is the ship, the AEOLUS, which was sunk off the Carolina coast as an artificial reef, just to get a reef started in that area. Next slide. And here are some pictures of different ships. That is a shark. It's probably a reef tiger shark. We do see them down there. I know there's been a lot of news about sharks, but again, you could get hit by lightning inside this building more commonly than you would even seeing a shark. Next slide. So in 2014, I think, or 2016, they discovered a World War II submarine off the coast. And it had been there since 1942. And it is not one that you can dive at yet. They're still exploring it, but they're still finding ships off the coast. Next slide. And here's some diving shots of submarine. These are submarines. More submarines. And they're huge. The ships are huge. Next slide. So what about diving in Virginia? All these trips we're talking about, you have to go 3 or 4 hours on a plane or in a car. But you can dive in Virginia. Now, off the coast of Virginia is pretty turbulent. But there is a lake called Lake Phoenix. It's not in Phoenix. It's about 2 hours from Charlottesville. Next slide. Where you can learn to scuba dive, and it's just 2 hours away. The lake is surprisingly clear. The visibility can be anywhere from 10 feet to 30 feet. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but you'd be surprised how much you can see. But this is where most people do their training. They're in the water, open water training. Next slide. So what does it take to be a diver? So open water training, that is the first step in diving. And a lot of people stop at that point. You don't have to do a lot more to really enjoy diving. You take a class online, takes a maximum of 4 hours, usually less. And then there's in-class training, which is about 4 hours, including a test. You have to pass the test. No one flunks the test. And then you have 2 practice dives in a pool, usually about 4 hours. And then you do your open water practice, and you have to do 4 dives, and that's at Lake Phoenix. And then you're ready. So it's not easy, but it really is fun. It really feels good. Next slide. So when I go out on dives, I always go with a master diver. I do not go alone with my dive buddy. I like to be with somebody who's really experienced. They want to make sure that you're safe and that you know what you're doing. They're not going to check you. They expect you to know how to do that. But if you run into problems, or if you have questions, or there's a little bit of equipment confusion, you've got somebody there to help you. And that's it. Any questions? Anybody there?
Yes. I took a scuba diving course at UVA, probably 1987. It was the most difficult thing I've ever had to do because it was me being older with all the young students. But it's not easy.
So
vision is impaired.
When I took it, the 2 students that were in my class were 22 and 21.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the old lady of the group, and so much of diving now is computer protected. So you go diving with a dive watch and a dive computer, and it will tell you how much time you have before you have to surface. It will tell you how deep you can go. It will tell you when you need to do an interval stop. So yes, when I did take the course when I was, I don't know, 35 or so. And I have to say that I spent a lot of time doing math. That is no longer the case. They do want you to have an understanding of how to do it without a dive computer, but you can do all your diving with a dive computer. So it's really quite different now. And I know what you're talking about. I don't remember it being outrageously difficult, but I remember thinking, oh, this may be more than I want to get into.
Exactly.
But the actual diving part is easy. You are literally floating in the water. There's no arthritis. There's no joint pain. It's you're not pounding on your joints. You're just swimming and floating. It feels really good.
Thank you. It was very interesting. I enjoyed it.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we're done. Linda, did you want to say anything?
Carolyn?
Carolyn.
Hi. Yeah. Oh, well, Alice, I just wanted to say thank you. And I had a question for you about what was the trickiest thing for you to learn in order to become certified, other than the math that you mentioned?
Okay, well, I have to admit that I had to spend some time playing with the dive computer, but I'm not very technically savvy. So I have a Fitbit, and that was about 3 hours of trying to figure out how the heck it works. And every now and then it still surprises me. So I am not technically savvy. The good thing about the dive computers is if you do something wrong, it sets off an alarm that you can hear very well in the water. And your assumption, if the alarm is going off, is go to your 15-foot rest area and stay there for a little while. But I have to say the hardest thing I think was the computer. Everything else is just learning something new. I'm not technically savvy. Medical people are famously not technically savvy.
Well, that I didn't know.
Yes, we do a lot of things, but when I first started my business and I had my first computer, I said, this is it, we're only getting one computer and I'm not going to learn it. You guys are going to learn it. And the exact opposite happened. Computers they're very important. They really do a lot for us, but we have to learn something new, which is always good for our brains. Not much fun though.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Who wants to join scuba diving?
And they've done that.
You could still do it. It's
I know, but I looked into it once, but now I'm too old now.
Never too old.
My most difficult thing was doing the don and doff thing in the bottom of the pool when I couldn't see what I was doing.
that was kind of a pain, but it's like anything else that you do for the first time. The first time you do it is awkward and weird and confusing and sometimes even frightening. But if you do it a couple of times and you have confidence that you can do it, it gets easier. I don't like taking my mask off in the water, but now I do it fairly easily if I need to clean it or something, Heck, I've taken it off to do a scratch. Why is it the minute you get underwater, your eye itches and you can't touch it? And you could sit there and claw away at it, but you can't touch it. So just finally learn to just take it off. And men with beards take them off all the time because they have a little bit of leakage. I actually cut my hair because I got tired of taking the mask off and pulling my hair out. So I just went ahead and cut it off. But I think you can do it. The nice thing is you don't have to fly. You don't have to spend an enormous amount of money to do open water. You don't have to fly to the Bahamas or to Florida or drive to Cape Hatteras. You can go to Lake Phoenix and actually get a feel for what the water feels like and what it feels like to dive. So, and they do have refresher courses. It sounds like you could do a refresher course and then do it. But don't think you're too old. That's what I thought. I was too old and I had asthma. And yet my asthma is actually better as a result of diving because my breathing is better.
Right.
Alice, we have a question. Where is your next scuba trip?
I am going to Cape Hatteras to do a wreck dive off the Carolina coast in September, late September. The last weekend in September. It's a 3-day dive. And that's a very nice thing about that is we're not getting on an airplane. I mean, I right now. I don't mind, if you want to go to the Caribbean and we don't have COVID-19 going on, in 3 hours, you're in the Caribbean. That's amazing. It's not, you don't have to go to Hawaii. I did go to Hawaii for one dive, but that didn't make any sense. It was, 10 hours on a plane so that I could do 15 dives in Hawaii when I can go to the Caribbean and it's just beautiful. And I need somebody to go with me. Madeline.
Oh, I don't know. I passed that.
You've got a month and a half. I'm expecting to see you sign up for that.
Well, I don't know about that.
You can do your online coursework. It's 5 hours. You've got plenty of time.
What's 5 hours?
The online coursework.
Oh, I can't remember how long it is. I did the book. I didn't do the online coursework. I'm old. I'm not going to do it online. I did the second one, the advanced open water online, and I did the nitrox online because everybody's doing it that way. And honestly, I guess in terms of paper production, it makes sense to do it online. I saved a couple of trees. That's good.
Okay, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Alice, and thank you, everyone. We'll be on next Monday for a volunteer's presentation on her trip to Kenya and Tanzania in East Africa.